And so the one particular case that I want to start talking about is the one going on down in Texas, and I want to kind of let you give the overview of what's happening there.
Would you give me a little bit more?
Well, with the children, with the babies, with the...
You're referring to the fact that there was a lawsuit that was settled recently where the gentleman had settled it because they found out that they were actually taking blood samples from newborns and creating a database. And the idea with that was that it was supposed to be for medical research, but it turned out that there were some law enforcement related issues as well. And basically they were doing this without the consent of the parents. And what I found ironic is that even though they settled the lawsuit, they had left out some very pertinent information that might have had an impact on whether or not they had settled at that time, and felt that it wasn't necessary to share because I think they termed it as being, we don't share all of our information about the various studies that we do, with the general public. But
so we have a government organization, the state of Texas, is collecting blood of newborn babies for some particular reason, and we don't know why they're doing it or what type of testing they're doing on this blood, and they feel that this is a good thing.
Well, they mentioned that the reason they were doing it was so that they can actually determine the ethnicity and certain things about possibly deceased corpses, and basically saying it's in the interest of medical research. But then the more you dug into it, the more you realized that they were also looking into it because I think they were providing it to the military.
Right.
There were some law enforcement related issues as well. And again, my biggest problem with that is that if you're not doing anything wrong, why didn't you notify the parents? If you didn't think that someone was going to say, no, don't do this, or no, I'd prefer to opt out, then, I think that you obviously realize that there's a problem with it or that some people would have an issue with it. Otherwise, you could have been upfront, especially given the fact that it went to the level of a lawsuit. This is not, lawsuits have discovery and depositions and all these other things. This is not somebody made it a casual inquiry. This was an actual case where they went to the point of settling and the lawyer thought that he had gotten all the information that was necessary to the case and he apparently didn't.
Well, the thing I find interesting about this whole thing is that with this whole idea of genetic testing, okay, because now we got all of these people that's involved in this and they have this genotyping and all this stuff and these specific drugs designated toward certain DNA and all that, that I'm concerned about what are they really looking for, because we're talking about babies. They're taking the bottom of their feet, pricking it, taking their blood. And what does babies have to do with the U.S. military? Why are they doing that? And I'm wondering if they're doing some type of testing or something else going on that we're not aware of. And the thing that troubled me more than anything else with the Attorney General for the state of Texas was when he was asked about the question of why they didn't bring up the issue or inform them about the military, he said, you didn't ask the question. We only answer what you ask.
And they turned around and tried to attack the attorney that settled the case by saying, well, basically, once you got your legal fees paid, you were satisfied.
Which is normal.
Yeah, which is normal. They're basically saying that once that was done, you were satisfied and there was really no need to present any other information because you probably wouldn't have really been interested. I mean, the idea is that they were pricking the feet of the newborn for genetic testing to make sure that they had no genetic disorders or things, which is fine. But like any other human being, if I go to a medical setting and you take my blood, that's my blood that I'm allowing you to use for whatever test that you're telling me you're doing. You can't just take it and start making your own arbitrary, database. It's an extreme version of the loss of privacy that people go through when they give their information and people start selling mailing lists.
Though? Isn't this the best thing for the public health that we have this type of testing so that we know how to treat people now?
Well, I mean, it's like I said, it's not a problem if you fully disclose and the people give their consent. Because if you think that this is such a good idea that everybody would want to go along with it, then you should have no problem asking for people's consent.
So this particular program was going on for a couple of years. It didn't just happen. where they were not getting consent from the parents. This thing has been going at least, what, I think 5 years, 5 or 6 years.
And the lawsuit, a very important part about the lawsuit is that one of the things that he won is that they had to destroy several, million samples that they had already collected. So if you've already...
How many samples? Several million
samples. So, I mean, if you've already determined the fact that, okay, you've accepted the fact that, okay, we say this is, you think this is wrong and we've accepted that we're going to settle by destroying this, to continue doing this or to continue trying to defend it is a problem.
And again, this was not just being looked at by the medical community. This is being looked at by police organizations and the U.S. military. And again, if we think we're doing the right thing, then we don't do things in secret, right? We do things in the open. So that way, in a quote-unquote open society, nobody thinks anything is up. But to answer a question of a lawyer that because you didn't ask this question, we didn't respond to it, and then later we find out in discovery that something happened, is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And they need to reopen the lawsuit.
Yeah, and no one's going to refute the fact that, medical advancements has helped. I mean, DNA testing, has gotten people released from jail, years after they've been wrongly convicted. I mean, we understand the purpose of medical advancement, but again, the secrecy is the major problem. There has to be somebody who realized that something's wrong with this, or that we're not going to get the large database that we want because people may object, if they just didn't tell people to begin with.
Just like the same thing with a lot of the people when they had particular rapes that were occurring down in Virginia, where the police came to the black community and wanted men to give samples and stuff. And a lot of people refused that. I'm not giving the DNA sample. For what? I haven't done anything wrong. I mean, and so our problem is that, what is the military really going to be doing with this? Because I know what you said. Now I want to know what they're really doing with it and stuff, because you kept it secret for so long. And the thing is, they don't. This is the part that blew my mind. They don't see anything wrong with it. And so when I start looking at this, I want to ask the question. First of all, let's look at the demographics of the people that they're talking about. We already can answer the question on that. We don't even. Do we really need to ask that question? Who are the people they were taking this blood from, and the majority, and what type of testing were they doing? None of that stuff has been, based on what I've read of the case, has been defined. And
like you said, I think the case should be reopened only because somebody needs to answer the questions that were put forth. I mean, it's one thing to say, okay, the lawyer got his money and so he closed the case, or you didn't ask the question, so we didn't. I mean, but the main issue is whether or not you're violating the privacy of those individuals that you did this to.